Hey everybody, it's Michael Martin. So we just finished recording the video that you're actually going to watch momentarily, and it's actually very, very technical. We talk about health. It kind of started as a easy conversation about what do you do to prepare, and it's not just the preparation for the trading. It's the emotional, it's the sleep, it's my diet, it's the jiu-jitsu, it's my yoga practice. Like all of that adds up to make me uniquely me and how I want to create alpha and create abundance for myself and for my clients. And it made sense to me after we kind of sat here and we watched the video afterwards that Ganja would put together like a one-pager of some of the big takeaways here because there's a lot to digest. There's a transcript for sure, but we're going to leave a link in the description if you want to get a one-pager on the things he spoke about in terms of the health, the diet, the sleep. As you're going to see, it gets super complicated. It's a little bit over my head. I know that I do it, but I kind of learned it instinctively. Recently, he's been helping me, especially in and around the fasting stuff. So if you liked what you heard today and you want to learn a little bit more that goes deeper into the science of it, click the link in the description. There'll be a landing page. We'll send you his one-pager. Thanks for watching, folks. Please like and subscribe.
Hi guys, welcome back to another weekly segment where Mike and I go over you guys' topics, comments, and questions. Today we have a different topic, but a really good one nonetheless. And I wanted to say, before we get into that, make sure you guys like and subscribe. All comments help the algorithm, and we really appreciate the support.
Someone actually even said something about that.
Oh, how
in the
so?
comment, they said, I want to thank the Google algorithm for recommending this show.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fun. I mean,
it's
that's
one of the more recent comments. I'll have to look and see. But that's Google doing its work, and that's kind of what we're talking about is like, how else would you find the show unless the algorithm? Because when it's not like we're paying for traffic, right? I don't have a media relations person, getting me on TV.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah, no, the algorithm works in mysterious ways. That's why, every time you guys comment, every time you guys like, it helps us a lot, and subscribe as well.
And please subscribe, because when I see the comments, it gives me a little icon. It says so-and-so subscribed. So if you're out there and you're watching the show all the time, and you're a regular listener, first of all, thank you very much for listening. But please subscribe.
It's free. Subscribing is free.
It's free.
Thank you guys for stopping by. And with that, we can get into today's topic, which is, we've kind of talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
And I've wanted to kind of run it by you. I've heard you talk a lot about, the preparation that goes into like a trading day.
I don't want to talk about that.
Well, I do.
Okay. You're the boss.
And then
You're the boss. But I know ZK fights, so be careful.
You do know ZK fight. I will be careful. I'll tread lightly. But, you talk a lot about like the art of war and kind of, the mental preparation that goes into a trading day, trading week. And I just kind of wanted to see, what do you do in like a day?
Oh, for the love of God. So there's no short answer to that. Okay, where do I start? So heretofore, I think I've spoken about like getting, kind of borrowing from what Paul Tudor Jones said way back when, that trading, is 5 to 8 o'clock at night. What he was speaking about is preparation, for the next day. So back when I started, those were the time frames that made a lot of sense, in as much that there was Globex, there was some overnight trading, but there wasn't a lot. There was definitely not a lot of pre-market trading unless you were in the fourth market on Instanet. But there was really the opening bells and the closing bells, and all of it for the most part constituted of what we call outcry session trading on the floor in the pits. So the preparation was geared around that type of trading day. Nowadays, the hours and the electronics have expanded it so that it's almost never ending in many ways. But when I think about preparation, and because this isn't a grind, I don't perceive trading as a grind. And I think if a person says that to themselves, like, wow, it's such a grind, they see the grind in it. I'm aware, though, that it can be taxing to a person if they don't pay attention to their overall mental, physical health, as well as their professional health. That's the kind of preparation I think most people are talking about, is their professional health. What are they doing to prepare for the upcoming trading session? Whether they do it the morning of, whether they're doing it on the fly, which is certainly not my style, or whether they do it the night before, which is more of my style. At least, preliminary preparation for sure. there's a whole lot that goes into me being me that, you've definitely kind of picked up on. I think probably because you can see it live. It starts with, right, because on any three levels, you have the professional preparation, and that's being prepared to manage the risk, how to add risk, how to remove it, and then how to handle it while you're in a trade. We call it managing the trade. Then there's, the physical part, and there's also the mental part. Mental part certainly includes the daily prep for the actual trading session, but there's so much more to it. It's like, the part of the iceberg that you can see. So I can really break this down, I suppose, into three different segments because they're all kind of related. I don't know which one would you like me to start with? Because otherwise I could be all over the place.
Well, I mean, I guess what would interest me is how your personal kind of behavior kind of prophesizes your professional behavior.
Yeah. Okay. So I always kind of figured, thanks to having a really good father who's an amazing man, he always said to me, character's what you have when no one's looking. And so when I was younger, I had a sweet tooth. I wasn't much of a drinker, never had a taste for alcohol. I did enjoy a cigar every now and then, but over time you figure out that those things, everything is kind of okay in moderation. But if you are judge and jury in your life, there's really no one there to stop you from really doing anything. And once you start making some money, the boundaries of what you can do and the liberties that you have are very, very, the boundaries kind of disintegrate and the liberties, grow. You can pretty much do anything, any way, anyhow, anytime. And that's a good place to be. But without discipline on what I let into my ears and pick up on my senses, but then also ingest, right? Whether it's through my lungs or through my stomach, through my alimentary canal. I think all of that shapes who I am as a person. Just my personal belief. Everyone might disagree. That's fine. But I just think like my behavior predicts where I end up in life for the things that I can control and also the things that I can't control. Like when God calls me to his kingdom. I don't know when that's going to be, but I know that I can do things in my day after day, to prolong my life, to enjoy my career, to enjoy my friends, to do, to be a pleasure seeker like everybody else. Now, I'm not a puritanical person, but I'm very, very hyper aware of what I need to do to perform at the highest level, which is kind of like my key asset, right? It was when I came out of being, working in caddying golf bags and doing these different things, I needed to find a way to get intellectual property or have some kind of skill or some kind of asset that was different than just going to do work every day. By the time I got to Wall Street, I was burnt out because I had been working pretty much straight since I'm 12, working during school, working during high school, certainly the summers and the winter breaks, the weekends. And I had had enough. I was like, this is a grind. I need to find a way to work more smartly. I'm willing to work hard. And then I realized, like, if you stay up late, right, or you go out boozing with your friends, it impacts me the next day. I wouldn't say I was a lightweight, but I definitely, with one drink, will absolutely feel the effect of alcohol. And the thing that I was aware of was that I could feel it the next day too. It wasn't like being hungover, but I knew that I had had a drink the night before. And I didn't like how that felt in my body. So if someone said, tell me something that you've never bought in the last 20 years, and that's a six-pack of beer.
Yeah.
I don't have alcohol in my house.
Yeah.
People give me gifts, and I got the big $150 bottles of the fancy tequila, but I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, you got a few bottles of Clase Azul sitting at home.
I have Avion, and I got the 1492, I think, but the seals haven't been broken, and there's 2 inches of dust.
Yeah.
Because I take care of my place. I have the cleaner come a lot. So I don't drink because I feel like it affects how I feel the next day. And I think it would be hard. You could probably do it because you're smarter than me, but I can't calibrate how that impacts me positively or negatively. So I assume it's negative. That my senses are and my intuition, because my timing and my sense of timing is very strong.
Yeah.
And if I feel sluggish, or even if I get it in my head, remember how I said you take an average idiot, give them a lot of confidence, they're going to take over the world. I put myself in that crowd.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do anything that's going to take away from the responsibility that I have, of managing risk.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, I've actually, this is something I've looked into quite a bit, I've seen, because I really just wanted to understand how really alcoholism works, and then you just kind of get down the rabbit hole of like the chemistry of what alcohol does to you.
Yeah. It's a poison, basically.
Yeah, effectively. I mean, it's not, they say more than one drink a week. Right now, this is the current studies being, kind of conducted and agreed upon. It's that more than one drink a week is terrible for you. It increases your risk of dementia by 6 times.
Wow.
And, for some individuals who are genetically predispositioned, it's actually way more than that. So, I caring a lot about brain health.
Yeah.
I choose really not to drink very often at all. I'm 21, but, occasionally I'll go out with some friends or whatever. But even then, I don't drink, more than one. The interesting thing about that is, you talked about how you feel the next day. And, you're not hungover, but you definitely feel the effects of alcohol. Alcohol is really interesting in the sense that it's a depressant, but it actually, long-term is bad. Long-term alcohol is really bad because when you take it, it actually has a temporary lowering effect of your cortisol and your stress hormones. So you'll feel really good when you're drinking and maybe, subsequently feel relaxed the day after. But long-term, if you're drinking more, you actually have really, really heightened levels of cortisol and other stress hormones and, inflammation factors that are really negative for you. So, that's why people can become dependent on it because they're like, oh, well, I feel like crap when I'm not drinking or whatever. It's like you feel like crap when you're not drinking because you shouldn't really be drinking in the first place. You shouldn't have more than, one a week, if that at all.
Yeah.
It's really a negative, as much as like, I grew up Italian, right? So there's always the glass of wine.
Hey, how you doing?
Exactly. There's always, the glass of wine, the sambuca, there's always something at dinner, right?
And is that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always something, but,
Janiola.
And
is it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
As I grew up, I started to learn, with my background in medicine and stuff, that it's just really something I need to completely stay away from.
Yeah, look, when I grew up in New York, we were all pedestrians. I didn't have a car for like 13 years because you're on foot, you're walking. That's how you meet people. Dating is very different in the city too because it's very much hand-to-hand combat. You're taking trains, get taxis. This is before, the rideshare services. And it was very easy to get off, take a train to some neighborhood, meet a bunch of buddies, have a drink, have a burger, watch the Yankee game, watch the Ranger game, watch the Knick game, whatever. And that was just the way of life. That's what you did after work. You meet clients, you meet peers, you meet colleagues, you meet your, folks that you work with in your company, but then also your strategic partners who might fulfill another area. They might custody assets. They might clear your business. And it's very easy to just do that a couple nights a week. And I just realized that that's a necessary evil in the business, but that's not necessarily what I get paid to do. Like when I try to really break it down and say, what is the alpha? The alpha, right, is what a manager brings to the table mathematically, I believe, above beta, which would be market return. So I always was trying okay, how can I make that distance wider and wider and provide a great deal of alpha? And I realized that it wasn't just looking at charts or coming up with the magic system. It was everything that I was doing in my life focused towards that goal. Because again, I knew where I came from and I had a great upbringing. Everybody that I had in my life were salt of the earth people. But I knew I had other gifts that God gave me and I wanted to put those to work. So I really had to reinvent myself and use my imagination to create for myself a life that I really didn't even know how to get. So when I take on, consulting clients and we talk about goal setting, it's not about getting $600 Golden Goose sneakers and Rolls Royces and stuff. Those are all the symptoms, like the runny nose of a cold. Those things will come to you if you have a process that you can repeat day after day after day. So that should be the goal, is to be somewhere around that process. And it's not even like the trading system. It's like, what do you want trading to do for your life? How do you want it to serve you? What is the money going to mean to you emotionally? Because once you can start buying expensive things, you know what comes with that? Regret.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like they always that joke about boat owners. What's the 2 best days of a boat owner? The day they buy it and the day they sell it.
Yeah.
Right? Because the things are alligators. They eat you alive. 2, most people, even though they might make money trading, you'd be surprised how few people have a very fundamental misunderstanding of finance. And they try to buy what they think are assets with debt, but they start immediately depreciating, right? So I had to learn all those lessons as well. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be one of these health nuts taking 75 supplements and this and that. I did benefit from yoga and meditation, how to quiet my brain and how to focus. I think one of the things that is not spoken enough about the impact of being able to meditate is conditioning your brain to drop out all the noise and the crap and being able to focus, which is enormously important because trading can really wear you out mentally during the day. It's a lot of brain work, like especially for the short-term folks who are at the screen all day. I would like someone to do a study to see, like, how do you keep your brain power going throughout the day? I have a couple of ideas myself, but so I looked at like what do I eat for your 3 squares, right? What do I eat? When do I eat it? Because I know blood sugar has a huge thing. Like when I was on Wall Street and I tried to eat like a big lunch with a client in the middle of the day, forget about it.
Yeah.
Hey, forget about it.
Exactly.
I was in a food coma, which has to do with your blood sugar, and it took me an hour to recover from lunch. And I'm like, something's not right here. I have to be on it.
Yeah.
And so speak to what happens like to the blood sugar, because I don't know the science the way you do, but I know how it made me feel. So I had to change my behavior just intuitively.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's called insulin dumping.
Yeah.
When you have like a really large quantity of food and the way it affects your blood sugar and kind of the downstream effects of that.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of just like an inflammatory process that, is good, but, it's not good for cognitive awareness and function and stuff. And I really like to break down, cognitive performance in 2 different categories, and that's creativity and then focus. And eating food completely obliterates both of them.
Yeah.
It's not like, especially a big meal. So it's not really something you can necessarily avoid. I mean, there are strategies of kind of negating that by, let's say if you eat lunch at 1:00 in the afternoon, you can have like 100 milligrams of caffeine or, something right after there to kind of help jumpstart. That's not going to negate the effect with insulin dumping, but it is going to also provide as like a subsequent stimulant to kind of get you back in the game as you're processing food. But, obviously that's not feasible for a lot of people. So, the first thing you look at is like, how do you change, the diet model? How do you not eat like a huge lunch like that?
Yeah.
What are the foods that make you have these issues? Because it really is different for a lot of people. For me personally, I don't tolerate bread that well. Like I do. But if I'm eating a big plate of pasta, like there's no way you're catching me doing work after. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. It's just brain fog. That's what carbs do. That's what insulin dumping does.
Perfect. So I didn't know all that science. I mean, I've read it since, but I'm going back, way back when, because this is like, again, I've been doing this for 30-something years. I realized like I would have that big lunch, or even if I went and got a lunch and brought it back to the office, because we were always taking working lunches if I wasn't seeing a client, right? I was taking a working lunch, eating at the desk. And then you have that insulin dump. And then what do you want to reach for? Like you said, it was either sweets, sugar, or caffeine. So then, again, I keep a list of everything that I do all day long.
Yeah.
Because the data doesn't lie.
And the sugar would make it worse, by the way, just to kind of jump in. Because this has to do with the mechanisms of how your brain perceives rewards. So, like, when you eat a bunch of salty stuff, your brain is instantly like, oh, well, I need the opposite of that. Have you ever, like, had, let's just say, like, fries and a milkshake, and you're like, oh, my God, I need more of that. And you just down it super quick.
Yeah.
That's your brain working. That's the lizard mechanisms that we've developed over our evolution.
I see that if I go have, I don't do it a lot. We have a couple of really good burger joints in and around here. I won't mention any names, but they're famous for like their burgers. And you can see people sitting there with a mound of fries, it's a gigantic milkshake, and this gigantic 3-shit burger.
Yeah.
And you can just see them like they don't even seem conscious of it.
Nope.
They're in a whole other world. And to be honest, a lot of the people that I see there are morbidly obese.
Yeah.
So I looked at my behavior that way and said, what can I learn from this? Because, again, I don't like how I feel. I don't like that crash and what's happening to me in the middle of the day. And I realized, like, and I'm not puritanical, but food is a drug.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had to figure out what's the best way to meet my nutritional needs, but to keep me in a spot where, because this is so viciously competitive, this business, right? And you could make it as competitive as you want, but at my level, it's very competitive. And I thought anything that would drag me down as a human being, that could be relationships, buyer's remorse on a purchase that I had no business being in, whatever it could be, like that could all impact your trading.
Yeah.
Victor Sperandio talks about the $4,000 hair dryer in one of his books. You can go read about it. And so I said, well, I need to take control of my environment. I know I spoke this week, or I will speak tomorrow or Friday, about being super lucky, but then also being aware of everything in my environment, the things I can control, the things I can't, the people that I was around. I knew guys that either had girlfriends or who were married, and then all of a sudden I'd see them out with somebody else, and I knew that they were probably betraying a trust and doing something along the lines of an affair. So I jettisoned those people out of my life. I don't need that drama. I don't need to be wrapped up in that. I don't need to bear witness to it. So I kept a very clean palate for all of that stuff, the things that went into my body. People like to vape now. This has got to be the craziest thing. No one knows what impact that's going to have on your lungs just because somebody tells you it's safe. Your lungs aren't made to get that aerosol or whatever whatever the fluid is, some kind. Was it like olive oil or something?
Glycerol. It's glycerol.
Yeah.
So the weird thing about that is they're vegetable oil derived products, but there's no standardization on them. So you don't know what you're vaping. Like, they come from, you can find them all over the internet. There's videos of factories and, other countries where the workers there are just hitting off the vapes that they're going to sell in America or, other countries in Europe or whatever. And, you also just have no idea what goes into the manufacturing process. Like, I know because I've worked with a lot of athletes and I've had to order, a lot of stuff from other places, and you have to purity test them. And, there's some pretty scary stuff that comes in, things that are advertised as one thing. You look at it and completely different.
We talk about nicotine and caffeine. Like, let's talk about nicotine for a minute, because, when I remember the pre-lawsuits on the cigarette companies, right? And then now all of a sudden vaping is a way people can they have these other things like Skull Bandits that you can put in between your, in your cheek.
The pouches,
to get your nicotine. What is, while we're on the topic, what's the deal with nicotine? Does it actually help your brain function, or is it bad no matter what?
Well, it's complicated. There's not a one size fits all answer.
Okay.
First and foremost, if you have any condition of heart history or anything like that in your family, bad idea. Run away from it. It's not good. Nicotine is really taxing on the heart, especially if you're predisposed to certain conditions. With that said, if you're fine, like if everything's okay, if you've seen a cardiologist, if everything looks all right, and they're never going to say, yeah, sure, go ahead and take nicotine. No cardiologist is ever going to say that. But if everything looks good, then there's nothing necessarily wrong with it as long as you're aware of the addictive properties of it. Nicotine is really neuroprotective. It's a stimulant. It actually works with acetylcholine and dopaminergic function. So it is really actually kind of positive in some ways for the brain health. I've used it in protocols before because I've read all the data on it and I'm very comfortable with the safety profile. I get blood work 4 times a year. So I'm really, really comfortable in my health and I know what I do. It is a very, very powerful stimulant. You don't really need much of it, and it is very effective at kind of driving that focus and creativity factor. Remember, I was talking to you about how I break up the different parts?
Yeah.
It's very good at both. And I've worked with a lot of stuff, mainly because, some of my own personal endeavors in managing athletes, I have to understand, what can I bring to the table, and with, my own experience, like if, they encounter a specific problem. Because you can read endless quantities of literature. There's tons of it out there, but you really don't know until you try it.
Yeah.
And, that's not to say I'm a guinea pig and I do everything. But, I have had to have personal experience with this stuff before I can personally recommend it.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's why, like, you see a lot of folks who they have a cigarette after every meal is for the stimulant effect after they have that insulin dump.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, and, there's a couple of things to say about that too. you know, it is really effective in communicating with neurological pathways. Everything that you have essentially goes back to your spine and goes back to your brain, right? So any muscle has a connection, and we refer to that as the mind-muscle connection. So acetylcholine is really effective in strengthening existing pathways or, you know, making new ones. So it's you know, if you're doing something, then you really do want to take acetylcholine enhancing you know, substances. There's a few of them. You don't have to take nicotine. There's alpha GPC. Nicotine has other properties that make it beneficial, but yeah, it is definitely a post-food stimulant that works very well. Like if you get insulin dumping and you need that extra level of focus, it is certainly, you know, good for the focusing effect, but you really do have to be careful because it will encourage, you know, hypertension. Your blood pressure is not going to look pretty after, you know, even a small quantity of nicotine. It's actually, it's very surprising.
Yeah, because I also know guys who you know who dip
Yeah.
after they eat. That shit's nasty.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm not preaching. I'm just saying, you asked me, how does this all relate to me? I've been exposed to the same stimuli that everyone else is. And you look at people and why they do that, and they got the big water thing in their thing, or they're smoking, or they're vaping now. And I was just like, okay, well, how does this help me get better? How does it help me do better in my life, not just in my trading, but my life in general? So then I came up with, you know, the mental game. The meditation certainly helps. The yoga helps too, because it's kind of like a moving meditation where you're not kind of sitting there trying to quiet your mind. But when you're focusing on the flow of even something simple like a sun salutation, you're taking your mind off of other things and you're focusing on the moment. And so one day is probably not going to make a difference. It probably has some benefit, but there's just so many benefits to like yoga and meditation on your body. Certainly if you do inversions, you change the blood flow, right? Because if gravity's pulling the blood down, it's like head to toe.
Yeah.
So when you go upside down, it changes that. So there's benefits there. Again, the focus is great. The jiu-jitsu is great too. It allows me to exercise my discipline muscle from another angle that's outside trading. It deliberately puts you in a difficult situation where you have to stay calm and be creative on how to get out of it. So it's great practice to condition your mind for everything in life, basically. So then you come down to like the diet. I'm in California, which, you know, we get up very early here for the markets. Even though they trade electronically, when I think about the opening bell, I guess, you know, cocoa and some of the softs open at like 5 a.m. local time. Then 6, I think sugar's at 6. The stock market's at 6:30. Again, even though there's pre-market trading. And so you can't really feel groggy, right? It's not a great profession if you're going to roll out of bed 10 minutes before those markets open and kind of don't have your stuff together. So I typically get up in time to wake up. I'm not a big coffee drinker because I don't want the jitters. I don't want to take in a lot of caffeine on an empty stomach. I don't like the feel of the acid in my stomach. I do enjoy like a warm drink, but again, because I don't want to get crashed on caffeine, because then you crash after a while too, right?
It depends.
Yeah. So I feel for me, if I have, and I drink decaf actually in the morning now, or I have a type of tea that has very low there's caffeine in it, but there's not a lot. I also get my brain going. I usually do like a crossword puzzle. I kind of scan the headlines just to get my brain going. Allows me to wake up. Got to make decisions, have to figure things out outside of the market, but it warms my brain up. And then again, it's entering the orders with a lot of discipline. I know what the orders are. I write them out by hand so I can see them. I can double check the math. I call them in. The executing traders read them back to me so we make sure there's no mistakes. And then as the diet field fits in, I tend to, and you helped me with this, so I'm not telling you anything that you didn't know, but I'm doing that 18-6 fast inadvertently, right? I kind of didn't eat in the day because I needed to stay alert. That obviously, you got to have a good diet if you're going to do the fast. You can't just say, oh, I'm not going to eat, and I'll eat whatever I'm going to eat afterwards, right?
Right.
So, we talked about if I'm going to have food, what is it going to do to my blood sugar? What is it going to do to my energy, especially if I'm in the workday? The workday here, well, the market's closed. The workday goes on, but the workday closes at 1:15-ish, right? Then all the markets are closed. So at that point, the performance part of my day in the markets is over until the next session. So that's typically when I start to have some food. And I used to just go eat anything. And, you helped me figure out, if I am on a fast, what to eat around it, if I'm going to have a meal, what should I have? But then also how to reintroduce food after 18 hours of not eating.
Yeah.
Right? You can't just go to, Five Guys.
Yeah. No, for sure.
So you can talk about that if you want. I don't mind.
Yeah, no, I've worked with a lot of dietary professionals and nutritionists over the years, especially when I was a professional cyclist. I was working with a lot of these guys for myself personally, and they taught me a ton. And then they were like, oh, you should go learn on your own. You should go do all this stuff. So I did end up pursuing that quite a bit, and I have a really extensive knowledge in how fasting works, how diet affects you, and just like a lot of the black holes, so to speak, of diet. Fasting is a really interesting one because, people generally eat like the wrong things when they're breaking a fast, or, they'll eat things during a fast that they're like, oh, I didn't know I couldn't eat that during my fast or whatever.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that we looked at, when I was taking a look at your plan was, how are we going to reintroduce food like you talked about? And I have a very specific strategy for reintroducing food.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away because it is kind of like, it's kind of like the secret sauce.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very effective way of reintroducing food, re-encouraging the gut microbiome, because that's one of the things that kind of disappears. Your body doesn't want to sustain something that it doesn't have to energy-wise, right? Because maintaining gut bacteria requires quite a bit of energy, because there's like a production and feedback loop. Mm-hmm. So when you fast, all that microbiome just kind of disappears. You have a very, very specific set of bacteria that remains. Mm. But, when we worked on the reintroduction path of food, that's, it's the most effective way to do it, honestly, from all the literature out there. And then one of the things that people often overlook too with the fast is like, okay, when you're in your eating window, what am I supposed to eat? A lot of people just completely negate protein. They're like, oh, whatever. Like, I can't eat that much. I can't eat that much meat. I can't do all this, whatever. So protein is a really big thing that we looked at too. And then also, the good quality fats, like when you're fasting, you're producing ketones, which are really effective at metabolizing fat. And, they're really good for the brain. They encourage that hyper-focused effect. And that's why people go on the keto diet, which I have thoughts on, but I can get back to. And yeah, it's a really interesting thing. People just overlook stuff. They're like, oh, well, I don't have to eat all this. Their calorie intake is suboptimal in their eating window, even if they're trying to, cut or lose weight. So yeah, those are all things that I really pay attention to when looking at somebody's fasting schedule. And yeah, just to touch on the keto diet for a second, I did keto for over a year and a half straight, no breaks, nothing. Tested my blood every day. You get a little finger prick, put it into a machine, registers how much ketones are present in your blood. Long term, it's a really bad thing. I had to do further testing, and you just get completely drained of glycogen. So your muscles are like really, really weak. That's why people, when they go on keto, they lose a lot of weight. It's mostly water weight originally. Eventually you can metabolize fat and lose quite a bit of it, but it's still, personally, I stick to a normal diet now after having that much experience on it and knowing what that felt like during an athletic career. Not something I'm interested in. It does have good effects on the brain for sure, but you have to, there's so many cheap keto foods, like, with artificial sweeteners involved.
Yeah.
It's just not healthy. Like, it's not healthy long term. If you want to do it for a month, go ahead. But if you're doing it for more than that, you're definitely draining all of your muscles of glycogen. Your lifts are going to be worse. Your cardio performance is arguably going to be worse. And, it's just not something for physical health. Mental health, maybe. But physical health, not so convinced.
Right, which when we circle back, I was thinking about like the whole person when I was looking at my performance and what could I do to operate at the highest levels. Now, again, no one has to do this. You can figure it out for yourself, like what's best for you. But for me, I wanted to give myself every possible edge because I knew, that's just how I wanted to operate too. I wanted to be healthy. I've worked hard to get where I've gotten, and I want to be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor, so to speak. So I don't want to be there, every time I'd see someone light up a cigarette, this is before vaping, I'd be like, look at this person. Like, I'm not judging them, but here they are working so hard to attain abundance. And they're doing things in their personal life that offsets that. They're not going to be around to enjoy a lot of it because they're doing very risky behavior.
Yeah.
By either drinking too much or smoking too much or just eating a lot of the wrong food all the time. And they can't figure out why, they're always 10 or 20 pounds overweight. So I was like, I don't want to be like that again. I'm not judging them. I didn't walk a mile in their shoes. I can only judge myself, which is what I did. I looked at my behavior and said, okay, does all my behavior line up to my hitting goals, my goals? Because I felt the impact of food on my body and my energy. I could feel it. So I'd make a note of it. Like, man, why am I so sluggish after lunch? Like, if I have work to do, I would be aware of having, a big meal for dinner. If I knew I had 2 or 3 hours of prep for the next day, I'd have to be mindful of that if I had a big meal, now my preparation's going to be bad because I had that insulin dump.
Yeah.
And then what happens if your preparation's bad? How can you possibly hold yourself to a higher standard on execution if your preparation's bad?
Right.
So I know this is probably way too kind of over the top for many people, but I kind of studied myself this way, long before Tim Ferriss came around and started doing the stuff that he did with his health. I looked at all of it because I was competing with myself, but I also knew that the big allocators, they are looking basically at your performance.
Right.
And so I needed to say, like, wow, I'm in this on my own, and I have to be hyper aware of what. Oh, and we talk about too, like other stimuli, like that's one of the reasons why I don't listen to the TV or to like trading podcasts or what have you. It's because I didn't want to be dependent on anybody else for that stuff. I didn't want to, if you're at a wirehouse, you need to know the story around the name because your clients are going to call. So you have to have something to say. You can't just say, well, I have a mechanized set of rules and I'm following my system. That doesn't work in the wirehouse,
right,
manner. If you're in the CTA space or maybe even certain investment advisory services, if you condition and coach your clients the right way, then you can help avoid a lot of those inbound phone calls where they're curious as to what's going on. How come we're in this, we're not in that? You can coach them so that they can kind of answer their own questions and not bother you and your sense of silence all day. So I never at the beginning, it seemed like that's what everyone did. They had financial news on, CNBC, right? You walk into any brokerage office anymore, if they're still going to the office, and I guarantee you there's a TV there, right, with the thing muted. And I just found like that's not a great source of information.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, it's, no matter how you cut it, it's going to be spun a specific way, right? So you're not getting the whole story.
So what I found was, because again, when I started, I was completely humble in telling everybody that everything I thought about Wall Street and having a career there was completely wrong. And it's laughable now. I even say, when I tell the story, I'm like, yeah, your firm provides research that you can count on. And everyone roars because it's like, no, of course, there's conflicts of interest. There's banking and consulting deals that are going on that the retail wirehouse folks will never know about. So there's all kinds of conflicts. It's not that it's bad research.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that humans are also not terribly great at prediction. They think they are. And they can see things after the fact that seem like, oh, yeah, I knew that. But predicting it ahead of time is actually a very poor skill that people have. So I was like, okay, well, I need to also go on a diet of my mind. And if I'm trying to figure out my own trading model, why would I care about some jackass fund manager who's going to only come on TV and talk his book? Right? So once you realize like that's a mode of behavior, we're going to have a manager in from Munder Funds. We're going to have someone come in from Franklin Templeton. We're going to have someone come in from Alliance. Now you got BlackRock, State Street. The names are all legit, but if you look at what the guys and the men and women say, it's always the same thing. They always talk about the economy. You got to do it for the long term. They're always talking about, and okay, give us 2 or 3 names that you like. So it's almost color by numbers, right? And if you're in the retail space where you have to have a story, you can listen to those guys and steal their lines and parrot it to the client who calls you as if you invented the line yourself. That was inauthentic for me. So I was like, I'm not even going to listen to that stuff. Because in half the time, the biggest waste of time, in my opinion, is to talk about the economy. If you're an investor, what do you care? You buy and hold. Doesn't matter, recession or not. You're not going to change your behavior because you've been told you can't time the market. Traders, on the other hand, they have a different ethos. They are timing the market. They do it all day long. So it's not to say one's better than the other, but I needed to figure out who I was as I was evolving as a young man on Wall Street and figure, like, why am I listening to this person? So they're smarter than me or they have more assets under management. Who cares about that? It's a function of marketing. But what is it that I could take? What data points can they iterate or enunciate that I could take and put into a trading model? And in every instance, it was basically zero. So I stopped listening to other people talk about how smart they were. So I kind of was very, like I said, I went on a diet of the mind. It's interesting to read things. It's fun to learn. Don't get me wrong. But, and I've said this before, maybe people better understand it now. We don't get paid to know stuff. You get paid to execute. So I would always focus, like, how can I execute at the highest level? And everything that I've said so far today with you really kind of adds up to that. What do I do? What do I allow into my world? What do I allow into my body? And then we didn't even talk about sleep.
Yeah.
So that I can execute at the highest level. That was my singular focus. And it was a lot more work than I ever would have imagined because you just don't know, if you don't have discipline, all the crap that can find its way into your life. So you have to be hyper aware. That's why I called it the inner voice of trading, because you really have to think about everything that's going on in your world and how does that affect your performance. I guarantee you, if folks are watching this now, they have and it's not everybody, but some of them probably have a new understanding now of what's going on in their lives and how it impacts their trading. You could talk about friendships, your relationships with your family. You could talk about boyfriends and girlfriends, drama. Like, all of that stuff adds up. So I had to draw really, really clear boundaries about the stuff that I wanted and also be clear about the things that I didn't want so that I could change my habits, right? That was the paradigm of personal responsibility. If something's in my life, it's by my own doing. And if I don't understand why, it's probably coming out of my subconscious. So it took a long time to break all this down. But then I had to say, okay, sleep-wise, I like movies. I like to watch sports. But I also realized, like, that's a big time suck. And so I had to go on a diet there as well and say, I have to pick my spots. I'd love to stay up and watch a movie, on one of the cable channels. It goes off at 11 o'clock. Well, that's great. But I have to get up, at 4:30, right? Or maybe I'll take an extra half hour if I know I don't have trades in some of the softs the next day. But I still have to get up early. And the later that I stay up, I felt in my body that it was the same effect on how I felt as if I had had a drink and gone to bed early. So if I had a drink and gone to bed at like 10, right, which is pretty good, I can do 7 hours and be right there, right?
Yeah.
So I found just through experimentation that if I had a single drink, whatever it might be, and went to bed at 10, and then if I go to bed at 11 or 11:30 and wake up at the same time, I felt the same way. Like, not emotionally hungover, but just like not sharp.
Yeah.
Like, man, I hope this day goes by without any big catastrophe.
Yeah, man, sleep is really such a weird topic. Like, it's never the same for anybody. And I highly encourage, anybody listening to, go do your own testing and experimenting,
Yeah.
you're never going to know by just assuming. Like, you can get a pretty okay idea of like how you sleep and how you function, but you're really not going to know unless you get something like this that tracks your sleep.
Yeah.
I use the Aura Ring, but there's, tons of them out there.
Yeah.
I personally think that they're probably one of the more accurate ones. The data seems to agree with my opinion as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done a lot of testing on my sleep, and you talk about 7 hours, dude. 7 hours is a nightmare for me. If I got 7 hours of sleep, I wouldn't be working. Like, I wouldn't be doing anything. I physically do not function well unless I get 9 hours of sleep.
Wow, yeah, that's great.
And that aligns with my chronotype. So there's like different genetic variabilities for why you sleep, how long you sleep, when you go to bed, certain light concentrations, and when your brain kind of winds down.
Yeah.
Mine is weird because I sleep a lot. Like, I need a lot of sleep. But when I function during the day, I'm really high functioning. My focus is like pretty much never ending. And you've freaking called me at 8 o'clock at night, and I'm still blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still
like last night. What, you get 9 hours last night?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Last night I got like eight hours ish. But yeah, I'm not gonna be as good as I was yesterday. To tell you the truth right now. But
right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really encourage people to test that. There's sleep is just super huge. Like, it's something I've studied a lot. Even when I was in med school, pre-med school, I did a ton of research because I really wanted to understand it. And unfortunately, it's different for everybody. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah, but you can't deny how important it is.
Oh yeah, huge. I mean, it's arguably one of the most important things you can do. Like, and there's a lot of factors for it, but it's, if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, sleeping is not good. Like, that's more time that you can get killed by a predator. Like a resting period. You shouldn't need a resting period. Evolutionarily, it's a very bad thing, but we need it. And if you don't sleep, then you go crazy. The most you can go without sleeping if you're forced awake with stimulants and whatever, there have been studies done on this, is like maybe a few days without physically falling asleep while you're awake.
Yeah.
So it's really huge. And, people really underestimate the different factors that go into it, what you eat before you sleep, when to stop eating before you sleep. Can you breathe while you're sleeping? Like, a lot of people snore and they don't understand that they have sleep apnea, and therefore they're not getting good enough oxygen while they're sleeping, and
it's not restful sleep, right?
Yeah, but they're physically fighting for their life while they're sleeping. Like, if you're snoring, if you're somebody who snores, you need to go get like a sleep study done immediately. That is the number one thing that will stop you from having a heart attack before you're 60. Like, I know some athletes who are really big into bodybuilding and stuff, and sleep apnea is a big problem for them because their necks are really big, and it's really hard when you're literally crushing your own esophagus while you're sleeping under your own weight. So they have sleep apnea issues, and one of them actually really did have some serious cardiac issues because of that.
The CPAP machine, though, is like a scuba diving.
There's no other fix for it right now. There's really no other way to fix it. Some people can get away with a mouth guard. Some people can get away with mewing, but
what does that mean, mewing?
Oh, mewing is like an exercise. It's like I don't want to do it on camera, but you're effectively pressing your tongue to the top of your mouth and making like a noise. That's why they call it mewing. And it was invented by an orthotropic guy who is a big believer in the muscles in your jaw, and that actually was a good enough cure for me to stop snoring for a while.
What's a sleep study test? What does that look like?
Oh, so yeah, they basically just hook you up to like a CPAP machine, sort of, and it just measures the oxygen concentration while you're sleeping, how many interruptions that you're having in your airway, and some are really good, and they'll measure like when you're falling into REM sleep, the different type, like deep, REM, light sleep. They'll measure all those as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's snoring's a really big one, and it's something people need to really pay attention to.
So basically, you make an appointment, you go someplace, they put this thing on you, and you take a nap.
Yeah, you can do it in person. Some places have the take-home kits. It's really different, and it sucks. Like, you can't really get one easily. Like, you have to go to. I mean, some general practitioners will do it, but like, in one of my family members' cases, they actually had to get approval from their cardiologist to do it.
Okay.
Which is ridiculous. Like, you shouldn't have to go.
So this isn't like something you could go buy on Amazon. You have this a prescription.
Yeah, It's a
Really?
Yeah. And it's a joke too, because it's like the majority of people don't even understand that they're, having issues while sleeping. And it's something they need to figure out, like I said, before they have any issues with, heart attacks, or even if you're like if you just wake up and you're like, man, I feel terrible and I got 9 hours of sleep, or, 7 hours, whatever's good for you normally, that you really need to look into sleep apnea if this is a recurring thing.
So let's talk about that. So snoring, because I knew, like, just from being out, going on vacation, hanging out with the guys, you have a guys' weekend, something like that. You guys might snore, but they don't snore all the time. Is it possible that someone, like, either, I don't know if it's because they're just wiped out, exhausted, that they snore intermittently?
Yeah.
Where they don't do it all the time?
Yeah, pretty much every human being is going to snore at some point.
Yeah.
Like, but it's why you're snoring. It's how long, like, allergies will make people snore. Like if you're, weather change or whatever, if the room's not humid enough, if you're not, dust free enough. So like, there are ways to eliminate that though. Obviously if you're traveling, very different. Like you can't eliminate that in a hotel room. From my own personal experience, whatever bleach that they use on the hotel sheets really just wrecks me, and I end up snoring a little bit. But yeah, it's something that is intermittent but still very deadly.
So let's talk about also, like, one thing that I thought, and I think I was incorrect many years ago, was that if you didn't get a good night's sleep, you could make it up with a nap.
No, yeah, no way.
Right.
Like that depends on your chronotype. That's like deep genetic history. Like that is something that, like I said, it's really different for everybody. If you come from a region of the world like, I don't know, like probably Western Europe, naps are pretty big, and they've been kind of like part of the genetic memory of that area and that region. So like Italians, they're really, really known for taking naps in the middle of the day. I think
in Spain they got the siesta, like Mediterranean cultures, like
absolutely.
It's part of the culture.
Absolutely, and
they eat dinner at like midnight.
Yeah,
like 10 o'clock at night.
Which I don't. Still, there's no way that's a good thing. But it really depends on what part of the world you come from, and even then, you're still not likely to carry that trait that allows you to nap and be restful. It's very weird. Like, there was this whole thing a couple of years ago where people were like, oh, I could do this weird sleep schedule where I, take 4 naps in a day so I don't have to have one big sleeping period at night and I can be more productive and stuff. And it's just like, dude, you would have to be like a Tiger Woods level genetic anomaly in order to do that. And hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people were doing it. Like, hey, look at me. I'm sleeping, in 2-hour blocks and getting 8 hours of sleep.
Or like Thomas Edison, right?
Yeah. I mean, and people, this is a side thing, but people said he snored like a maniac. And that also kind of encourages the fact why he couldn't sleep for long durations of time. Yeah. So if you're...
Wake himself up.
Yeah, you would wake yourself up. You'd be snoring, and then, like, out of nowhere, you'd wake up, you'd jolt, and you'd be like, where am I? Like, and you didn't necessarily have a nightmare, but you literally are just fighting for your life because you can't breathe.
It's amazing. So much more science is available now. But anyway, this is kind of like a long-winded answer to, I think what I thought about when I was starting out and how I wanted to, study my performance on every level, because I thought it all added up. I think, too, if you act intentionally, right? They say intentions equal results. So I wanted to act intentionally, and so that's why this isn't something that hit me like a lightning bolt in one day. It was just the observation that over time, every person that I'm with, everything that I listen to, every TV show that I watch, every piece of research that I read, all the homework and study that I did on my own, every book that I read, because we didn't, the internet didn't exist. I realized, like, I am the sum total of all my habits, right? Intentions equal results, and I'm responsible for everything. I don't get to blame other people, because blame to me is when you really said that you had a blind spot in your self-awareness. So I was like, I can't use that as an excuse, because there's someone better than me who's not. So I was like, okay, it's not like I screwed it up, but I don't like the result that the presence or the absence of this thing is providing me in terms of the results. So I have to make an amendment. That's why I say it's an evolution. It's probably a lot to do all at once, but you said what goes into the day, right, or preparation. It's your life's work is preparation. That's the way I look at it. It's really your life's work.
I completely agree. That's something that I've had to, any performance-based person understands that, you know, and whether it's like subconsciously, they're like, oh, well, this is the meal that I eat every day before I do this activity or whatever. Like that happened a lot with some of the guys who I used to race with who weren't at the same level. They'd be like, well, this is what I eat on race morning and I'm never eating anything else. You know, it's just stuff like
habit.
That. Yeah, absolutely. It's a habit, and it's also,
and it feels good.
And it made them perform well the last time. You know, it's just little things that you study, and you know, I go to the deep end for sure, like on performance-based I mean, you know, like who can remember all this stuff off the top of their head? You know, like this is something that I've studied for a long, long time.
Yeah. Well, so I know this is a big question. And there's there's 8 facets to the diamond, so to speak, right? So did I hit them all, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think we did a good job touching on everything.
Yeah, I mean, you do a great job of understanding this, and I've benefited a great deal from, the things that you've told me, and I've increased my self-awareness, and I incorporated a lot of the stuff that made sense for me. I do get blood work done too. Of course I'm older, so that's a good thing for me to do, but I guess it's a good spot to cut it.
Yeah, I think so too. This this was definitely more in the weeds, I guess, than some of our normal episodes.
It's important though, I mean, because it's also about your life.
Yeah.
So trading isn't your life, even though people are like, yeah, trading's my life. Your life is your life, and trading has to be a part of it. And for me, it was important enough to want to be prepared to the nth degree.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, we got a little more on the technical side today, but I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate all the support. If you haven't already, make sure you guys like and subscribe. All comments help the algorithm, and I will see you guys in the next one. Okay. Good to go.
So what we can do then is Okay, everybody, thanks for being here. Please take a minute, like and subscribe to the show. You could also leave a comment. I don't have all the answers, so it's good to get some feedback. Also, if you would like to support the show, check out the links below. You can get the free audiobook of The Inner Voice of Trading, and also information about the course that I teach with Victor Sperandio. Thanks for being here, folks. I'll see you tomorrow.